to be a priority for the government, doesn't it?
Well, waste is a priority. If I would just say something about the nature of regulation. I mean, the design of the reactor that would be built at Hinkley Point, the European pressurised water reactor, has been the subject of a very lengthy and detailed safety assessment by the nuclear operator over 4 years. And that work was done in advance of construction in order to provide that sort of assurance that it would be acceptably safe to be built in the UK. The question of waste, which is one that has to be dealt with. I mean, there is a significant amount of existing waste from the legacy of early nuclear stations, nuclear facilities. That has to be dealt with. The government has a policy that there will be a deep geological repository for handling or managing this waste ultimately, and that policy is being pursued, and it's one where we believe there are technical solutions available to the waste issue. What is needed is, if you like, the sort of political will to get it going. But in the meantime, the waste is safely stored and contained at the sites or at Sellafield.
Nick Pidgeon, I mean, you're director of the Understanding Risk Research Group at Cardiff University. Are you convinced by that? Do you think that those assurances are made?
In all the research work we've been doing, although over the last 10 years, the public have become, at a national level, have become more favourable towards nuclear energy. Waste is always the one that's come up at the top of concerns. So there's always a residual concern about what would be done with it. And of course, we don't actually have fully a solution to the waste issue currently. There may be a repository at some stage, but no decision has been taken there. And I think also one of the questions for the industry, aside and the regulation question is very important, I think, both in terms of waste and operation of the plants, that the industry, the onus is on the industry since Fukushima to ensure that these plants are operated in as safe a manner as possible, and that includes during operation and during storage of the waste. Locally, I'm right in saying that the pressurised water reactor, as at Sizewell, the waste will be stored on site for about 60 years. I think that's right. So again, that's something that the conversation has to be had with the local communities about their views on that.
What's your reaction to that, Fiona?
I think a lot of people in the local communities still have genuine concerns about that, and I don't think that they have really been asked the question. This new facility is about to be built. It's being built alongside an existing nuclear facility, so that's sort of less problematic than finding a greenfield site somewhere. But a lot of the people I spoke to said that they didn't feel that they had been informed either by the company EDF or by the national or local government about all of the implications. And certainly this issue of waste being stored on the site, most people are not aware of that in the local area. That's my finding. Obviously, that's very unscientific, because I was just, wandering around talking to people. You need to do a proper survey to find out, exactly what the awareness was. But that's certainly what I found. So
they do still remain to be convinced, Keith?
I'm surprised that people feel that they have not been given enough information. I mean, the nuclear energy policy, if you like, the national policy was the subject of extensive public consultation several years ago, whereby the government made it clear certainly what their policy intention was, and then had a variety of public consultation methods and measures to ensure that public concerns were listened to. And certainly locally, EDF had to put in a planning application which required something like 3 years of discussions with local people to ensure that the concerns again were listened to, and that measures were put in place to address and mitigate those concerns. So I think there has been a significant amount of engagement with the public over both this project and the policy nationally.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. We're discussing nuclear energy in the UK with The Guardian newspaper correspondent Fiona Harvey, Professor Nicholas Pidgeon, who is Director of the Understanding Risk Research Group at Cardiff University, and Keith Parker, Chief Executive of the Nuclear Industry Association. Accepting the significance of nuclear power in terms of decarbonising an economy, I spoke to Tom Blees. He's the author of the book Prescription for the Planet. He's also president of the Science Council for Global Initiatives, and he spoke to me earlier on about fourth generation nuclear power.
The one that I would like to see built is the PRISM reactor, which is the one that GE Hitachi offered to build for the UK to dispose of plutonium. Besides taking care of the plutonium problem in a very short period of time, 5 years, it would also place Great Britain at the forefront of a modern technology that would not only allow Britain to be energy independent for 500 years with fuel you've already got out of the ground, which is a pretty major thing, but you'd be able to export as well. So it'd be a fantastic deal for the UK to do that. The safety features of the PRISM are just exponentially greater than other reactors that are available.
Why don't we follow that path, Keith?
Well, certainly the PRISM reactor is one that we're aware of. It is being proposed by GE Hitachi, both as a means of treating and disposing of the plutonium stockpile that the UK has, but also to produce electricity. And it is being considered along with other options, particularly for plutonium disposal. It is a reactor, a next-generation reactor, a fast reactor. So it is not available at present. It's still going through sort of assessments in the US, but it is something that we are looking at, and the government has set out a longer term vision for nuclear, which would include these sorts of developments, maybe small modular reactors, but certainly these generation 4 technologies as well. Britain will be engaged in all of these.
Nick Pigeon, what do you think? I mean, he's talking about in terms of less than 1% of uranium is used. Here we have something potentially 100 times more efficient than that.
I think we have to look back at history. At the early history of the nuclear industry in the UK is that a relatively small country like ourselves couldn't go it alone on several reactor types. So I'm not an expert in this particular technology, but the difficulty with a new mark of reactor is you're always going to get early teething problems. You're probably going to get more cost inflation than with other types, and that you need we would need quite a large indigenous science and technology base, which to some extent is no longer there to actually take that level of research and development forward. So that's the problem with opting for a completely new type of reactor, even though there may be benefits in terms of safety or economics further down the line. I should say, probably dealing with the plutonium stockpile, it would be a deeply political issue that would have to be sorted out by government. It's not something that any of us around the table here could really vouch a strong opinion on.
Fiona Harvey, I mean, PRISM can also use depleted uranium.
I wouldn't like to endorse a particular technology. PRISM is one way of using up the plutonium to generate more energy. There are other sort of methods on the table. But certainly the idea of using plutonium as a fuel and a new generation of reactors based on that is a very attractive one. And Sir David King, who was the former chief scientific advisor to the government, he's endorsed that very strongly. And in fact, he's now back in government as an advisor. So perhaps he'll be pushing that agenda, and we can see what comes from that. There's also another very interesting technology that we haven't touched on, the thorium technology, which is said by nuclear experts to be safer than some of the other nuclear technologies.
Keith Parker, it's safer, thorium.
Well, thorium again is another one of those, if you like, longer term technologies in which there's a lot of interest. But I think if we go back to the beginning about the need to address some of these pressing problems about replacing our aging capacity, we need to move forward with the technologies that are available now. And I think that it would be a mistake to predict what is going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years' time in terms of technological developments. We need to be able to fill that gap and look forward perhaps to further developments beyond that time period.
Anti-nuclear campaigners have told me that the UK loses through inefficiencies 8 times more energy than is produced by nuclear power stations. Nick Pigeon, shouldn't this be a focus of government policy perhaps as well?
Well, absolutely, and I think that's you in a way you've put your finger on the heart of the problem, that it's not the energy crisis is not just a crisis in supply, it's an issue of demand as well, and that we therefore have to, across the board, address the question of demand. It's both changing the way we heat our homes, it'll be changing the way we travel, a whole raft of changes in use of energy to make it more efficient and to cut waste out. So that's I don't think on the supply side, whether you talk about renewable energy, carbon capture or nuclear, we're going to solve the energy security and carbon problem that we've got purely by generating more energy and then wasting it further down the line. We have to do both.
And certainly, Fiona Harvey, in the teeth of discontent over rising energy prices that have been announced over the last couple of weeks, I suppose the government does have a problem, especially now that David Cameron is looking at rolling back green levies. I'm wondering where Hinkley fits into this debate about energy security. I mean, do you see potentially in 10 years' time, when it does come online, that we will have a very different energy mix in the UK?
Well, we can hope that we do have a very different energy mix by then. At the moment, the energy mix has been affected by coal-fired power plants coming out of service, nuclear plants soon to come out of service. A lot of companies have mothballed their gas-fired power plants because it's quite expensive. So we are in a pickle at the moment. I don't think anyone would deny that. And prices are going up. And just on this point of energy efficiency, the government's only policy on energy efficiency, which is the Green Deal for households and the energy company obligation, which are supposed to give people loans to improve the energy efficiency of their homes. And we have the leakiest, draftiest, coldest homes in Europe. That policy is failing. Very, very few people are willing to take out these loans because they're incredibly expensive. So the government's only policy to make people more energy efficient is just not doing it. And at the same time, we're about to spend £80 billion on a nuclear policy. You tell me whether that's sensible.
I think what we need is a balanced mix of energy sources to provide that long-term security of supply. Low-carbon technologies with lower predictable operating costs can provide a hedge against the uncertain and volatile costs of imported fossil fuels. But I agree entirely that we need to look at across the piece. Energy efficiency has to be improved. The quality of our housing stock, the insulation of our housing stock needs to be improved. It's not just about the generating side, but we do need a mix of technologies in the generating in the generating side.
And just finally, Nick Pigeon, do you think that mix will work for the United Kingdom in 2023, taking into account nuclear power and Hinkley, but a broader energy mix which will ensure that the lights won't go out? Are you confident that will happen?
I think it's a longer story that we have to deal with. It's got to happen, actually, if we're to meet the targets that, through the Climate Change Act, we are legally obliged to, and if we are to avoid the lights going out at some point in the future. So there's a need for it, in a sense, a root and branch look at all of this. Nuclear is only a part of the issue in relation to actually changing the infrastructure over the longer term. So there's a much wider and larger set of issues embedded with all of this, which are only likely to get more, I think, contentious.
That's Professor Nicholas Pigeon, Director of the Understanding Risk Research Group at Cardiff University. Also here in the studio, Fiona Harvey, Environment Correspondent for The Guardian newspaper, and Keith Parker, who is Chief Executive of the Nuclear Industry Association. Thank you all for joining me, Brendan Cole, on The Voice of Russia in London.